Hey everyone, I'm John Lynn, the founder and chief editor at Healthcare IT Today, and I'm excited to bring you another in our series of interviews with top leaders in health IT. And our guest today is Ellie Toubiana. He's CEO at ScribeMD.ai. Welcome, Ellie.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, excited for this discussion. Another in our series of ambient clinical voice features and kind of intros to companies working in the space. So excited to dive into the questions. But before we go there, tell us a little bit about yourself and ScribeMD.
Yeah, so my name is Ellie. I'm a repeat entrepreneur and engineer. And around 3 years ago, my wife and I, we had our first child, and she was an OBGYN resident. And so for anyone who knows anything about OBGYN residency, that was like a really kind of a painful process. And at the time, I was like finishing up my last company and trying to figure out what's next. And uh, uh, I looked a bit deeper into our workflow, and I was like, something is not quite right. Like physicians are trained for like years and years, and they spend time doing like admin work. And so since then, I've really been on a mission to kind of like help physicians automate the busy work that they don't like and focus on the real work, which is spending time with their patients.
I love that everyone has this story of how they got into healthcare, right? Yours is your wife and then the kid, talk about your history. What did you do before? Was it AI before, or is this a kind of a new entrance to do AI to, solve it? And I assume it wasn't in healthcare, it was in something else.
Yeah, so we were doing finance, and at the time, actually, even like only 3 years ago, we used to call that machine learning, and so we were applying machine learning methods in finance, especially in payments. And before that, I was an engineer at Uber, where I was working on their payments team. So
Okay.
I've had like a really deep experience with payment, but I would say fairly new in AI and also fairly new in healthcare. And the product has been growing kind of like we felt like a really quick like market pull. Every time we tell physicians like, hey, we're here to automate the busy work. They're like, oh, please show me your solution. I want to use that.
It's amazing, right? I mean, that's the beauty of ambient clinical voice right now. So talk to us about how ScribeMD compares to I won't list it off here now, but there's a lot of companies in the space. Talk about how your solution compares to those other competitors.
Yeah, I think there are a few things. So as you mentioned, we do have an AI medical scribe solution, but I would say our goal is really to build an AI assistant for physicians. So
Mhm.
it's not only about AI medical scribe, and I think we do a really good job at that, but we know that physicians they don't like stacking tools on top of one another. They really have like to use only a handful of tools, and these tools do many. And so that's what we've been doing with our AI solution. So we have an AI medical scribe, but also we have like an AI search engine that helps physicians stay up to date with guideline and the latest articles, like the latest like PubMed article or whatever. We have another tool that helps physicians analyze lab reports because sometimes lab reports can be really tricky to read. So we use kind of a chat GPT type of technology to do that, or automating like tool to automate reaching out to your patients, like all those kind of like bundling them up into one tool that we call ScribeMD.
Interesting. I mean, yeah, I mean, you're opening this box, right? I mean, and I think everyone in this space realizes that if we're successful with ambient clinical scribing, there's going to be a dozen more opportunities. I mean, you didn't even mention the one that I think is obvious, which is the AI assistant saying, "Here's the last three lab results," or "Here's a generative AI summary of the patient's history, including from external sources." But I mean, it sounds like that's part of the vision too, maybe.
Yeah, I mean the tricky thing is when you're talking about AI is mostly about data, and I know we haven't talked about that yet, but today the database for most physicians is their EHR.
Mhm.
And so to really get access to that data, you have to not only like have a shallow integration with their EHR, but have a really deep integration with their EHR. And so that's what we're working on so that we can tap onto that data. And so I would say we have like a shallow integration with over 100 EHR. So we are pretty wide, but what we're trying to do is also build partnerships to go really deep in a handful of EHR so that we can do exactly what you're describing. We can have like a super holistic view of a patient. And essentially the physician or the clinician can talk to the AI to like, hey, remind me, what did the patient had last week? Or hey, did the patient like mention diabetes the last time I talked to them? like having like a really like high level view of over their health and being like a really good medical assistant.
Yeah. Well, we also need to solve healthcare interoperability since the EHR is only one source. But anyway, a topic for another day. Let's dive into your ambient scribe solution. Yeah, walk us through what does the workflow look like for a clinician? Is it mobile? Is it desktop? Give us a feel of the workflow.
Yeah, so I would say also you talked about differentiation. From my understanding, we're the only one who have three different ways that you can interact with our scribing solution. Number one is you can use your computer, any room that has a computer. We integrate with a bunch of EHR, so Athena Health, Epic, we're like embedded in those applications. So that's an option. So you use your computer, you can use ScribeMD, you press a button, start recording the conversation. When you're done, you press another button, and within 20 seconds, you get a fully written note for your patient. So that's one option. Number two is we have like an iOS and Android application. So same thing, it works really well for like we have a lot of nurse practitioners using us. They see their patient in person, so they go to the patient. They need to have a solution on the go. That works really well. And the third option, which I think is really unique in the industry, is we have a little tool. I don't have it on me, called Jarvis. And it's essentially as big as your thumb, and you clip it onto your badge, and you press a button when you start talking to a patient. You press a button again when you're done talking to the patient, and then it will automatically use our AI to summarize the conversation. And the really cool thing about it, it works really well for physicians that do very short consults. So if you're in an emergency room and you're going from one patient to another, if every time you go to a patient, you have to open your computer or open your phone, press record, the whole thing takes time and it really adds up. Whereas you go see a patient, press a button, you're done, press a button. That's it. And then whenever you connect to your computer, you get your 20 visit notes that are fully generated.
Fascinating. Yeah, I don't think I've seen another ambient voice one that has a dedicated device. Makes me wonder if you need to partner with Vocera and add it to their badge, but that's another topic. Another opportunity down the road. Talk to us about the background, what's happening in the background. And in some ways, this question's getting dated, I think. But how much of your technology and, this AI scribe is automated with technology versus are there humans in the background? How do you look at kind of that pure technology versus technology and human or however you're approaching it?
So for us, I mean, obviously it's always technology and human, because at the end of the day, we do a lot of training with our physicians, and we always tell them the AI is going to give you a first draft of your note. The goal is today it takes you between 3 and 5 minutes to write each note. With our AI, it should take you around 10 seconds to review the note. But there's always a human, essentially, like the clinician has to always be involved
Sure.
in
The
the note writing,
clinician
100%.
human's always in the
But
loop.
yes, exactly. The clinician is always in the loop. The AI doesn't like self-drive itself and start like writing stuff into the EHR without the consent of the clinician. But the high level is like everything else is automated. So we have speech to text technology, and we have a large language model that we've been fine-tuning, especially for summarization. So those are the two parts where AI takes place. So we hear what you say, we transfer that into words, we take those words and we transfer that into, we use a large language model like OpenAI, something different, but like OpenAI, to actually summarize the conversation.
Interesting. Yeah, it's good. Everyone's moved that way, right? And we knew it had to, right? I mean, when I was interviewing someone a year ago, I said, "Hey, it's great, but we need to get humans out to lower the cost and increase the speed," right? And so, I think we're there. That's why with most of the
Especially
solutions.
if you think about it, like there's like expensive labor and cheap labor. Cheap labor is not going to have a ton of medical contact, and I think we already got to the parity where AI is much better than cheap labor. So if you have someone who doesn't have a lot of medical experience, AI is going to do a much better job. So then the only way you can replace AI right now, at least, is with someone who has really good medical context. And at that point, you might as well have the clinician review their own note.
Yeah, that's interesting. Cheap labor versus expensive labor. Wow, interesting concept. You mentioned some of your efforts around integration with the EHR. I think it's going to become a differentiation point. like 6 months from now, I'm going to interview everyone and say, how are you integrating? It's going to be a totally different conversation. But, tell us more about that integration. What's available today? Are you doing more of a copy paste on you talked about the 100 EHRs that you integrated with versus kind of the deeper ones you're doing with Athena and Epic, et cetera? Where are you
Yeah.
at today on the EHR integration?
So there are three different paths. So one is we have what I call a shallow integration. So over 100 EHR, what we've been doing is we've been taking the format they want the note to be written in. We take that format, and then we have a Chrome plugin that essentially goes over the EHR when you're using it. And then when you can right there, and then you can record the conversation and automatically fill out all the information there. So that way we're actually connected with over 100 EHRs today in the US. The number two is we do deep integration with EHRs. So Epic and Athena, the first two that we worked on, but we have a bunch more in the pipeline. And that's way more powerful because we can do things like we can pull patient information directly from your EHR so that within ScribeMD, we have the patient contact. So that when Patricia says that our name is Patricia, we know how to spell that, right? And we just don't guess. So we can do things like that. That's really powerful. And the third one, which I think is really interesting, and you talked about EHR being a competitive advantage to partner with EHR, is we've been actually working on white labeling our solution for EHRs. Because in the US, I think like the last time I checked it, you probably know better than me, but they're like what, 500, 600 EHRs in the US?
Yeah, probably about 300, depending on how you count
Okay.
them.
And in my opinion, like a lot of them don't have an app store. So doing a real integration with them would be tricky. I think most of them they probably already want to have an AI like scribing solution. And so what we've been doing too is white labeling our solution. So there are 3 EHR right now today that we're working with, and we're providing our solution, but fully white labeled, where I have the logo of their EHR, it's integrated with their EHR. They don't really have an app store, so we're not really an app inside their EHR, but we're working with them to actually have an AI like medical scribe within the EHR.
Yeah. And we've seen it. I mean, it's going to be interesting how that whole marketplace of AI ambient solutions evolves. We see some that are partnering, some that are white labeling, some that are white labeling and then still providing that stuff to someone else to be able to integrate as well. So it's a wild time right now. It's the Wild West for now as each EHR vendor approaches it and builds out the APIs that are needed to be able to do the integrations that deep. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yep.
Talk to us about kind of the onboarding process, the training process, and what a clinician has to change. Do they have to change anything and how they see in the exam room? For example, I mean, we've done a lot of these, right? They have to verbalize what they're thinking because the ambient voice can't hear what they're just thinking. Anyway, and how do you onboard people? How do you train people? What's your approach for that? And any other changes the doctor has to make as part of that onboarding?
Well, by the way, I love that you mentioned the fact that physicians have to sometimes they have to say out loud what they think so that the AI scribing solution can actually pick that up. As a matter of fact, just fun fact, we actually onboarded a few months ago a series of vet clinics for the first time. And so like obviously like the patient in that case usually doesn't talk. And so we have been
They don't need
training
to
the vets to
verbalize
be
it
like,
for the dog.
you have to verbalize everything you're doing to the dog. And so,
Yeah.
the dog appears to be in pain because I don't know, like you can hear a sound, assume that the dog is in pain, but the AI doesn't do a good job yet figuring that out.
Well,
Even
the
though I don't know
dog's
if you
not
saw the
telling
last
you, hey, I got
OpenAI.
pain in my right knee.
No, no, absolutely not.
Interesting.
So, but in terms of training, you're absolutely right. Both end of the spectrum, we have like independent physicians that decide to use us, and I would say there's essentially no onboarding for them. They can download our application, go on our website. Takes 5 minutes to sign up. You have 10 free visits a month. You don't have to pay anything to play around with it. So that's really straightforward. And also, we're working with larger institutions. So when we're working with larger institutions, most of our training actually we don't do it too much on the physicians. We do a bit of training on the physician. We show them how to use the application and what are the gotchas and how do you edit the notes and how do you make a note sound like you. We can change the way a note is structured, or like, do you like your notes very concise? Do you like them very verbose? So you can edit that. We show you how to do that. But also we did quite a bit of training on the staff. So what type of consent form do you need to give to the patient to make sure that they're accepting to be recorded? What if a patient opts out? Like, how do you deal with that? What if a physician that logs out? Like, how do they log back in? And like all these things around more like the administrative aspect rather than like the patient interaction. Really, our goal is to change as little as possible with the patient interaction. In the exam room, the patient, obviously, you need to tell the patient that they're being recorded. Either there's a consent form, or the physician says it verbally while they're recording. But once that's done, the goal is simply more human interaction. The only thing that we tell, like usually our patients find striking is they're like, oh, I noticed that my doctor wasn't typing away on their computer while they were talking to me.
Yep. It's amazing the difference, right? I have so many experiences with a pediatrician with his head in the laptop and wondering if he's even listening. Let's talk about accuracy. I think it's always interesting how each company is approaching kind of measuring the accuracy, like how accurate is your solution? How do you approach, knowing if it's accurate? I'd love to hear your thoughts on the accuracy of the solution.
Well, I mean, there's one thing we already do today. It's pretty clean. Is we actually, every time there's a recording at the end of the note, we ask the physician if they're satisfied with the note. This is optional. So sometimes often I would say the physician doesn't say anything. Sometimes they say that something was wrong, and most of the time they say something was right. Right now we have 99.2% of notes that are either the physician is silent, doesn't say anything about it, or is happy with the note. So we still have a bit less than 1% of notes that are problematic. And the way we deal with accuracy is twofold. So if you think of like the way data goes from conversation between a patient to a medical note, it goes from one bucket to another. So the first bucket is we need to take that conversation and transform that conversation into text. And sometimes that's wrong. Like sometimes the physician will talk about a drug, and you'll say like, oh, I need to recommend Paxlovid for my patient, and the speech to text is not going to recognize the word Paxlovid. So that's one inaccuracy. And the other inaccuracy is sometimes large language models are just wrong. Like they mess up. Like I'll give you an example. Let's say I go to my doctor and I talk about a trip to Hawaii that I had, and then I start talking about the fact that I have a stomachache. Maybe the fact that I was in Hawaii is relevant medical information. Maybe it's not. So the AI is not perfect. Sometimes it will get it wrong. So I would say these two buckets are the one we're trying to improve. And in terms of like speech to text, I mean, this field is moving really fast. And I would say we use right now the state of the art of technology for speech to text. And one thing that's very unique from my understanding is we are the only one that are supporting more than 50 languages. So we have a lot of patients a lot of doctors that are doing clinics in Chinese. We're based in LA. We happen to have also a lot of patients, or a lot of physicians that are doing consults in Spanish. And so those are like something that we really care about. So that's one thing. And for the other part is the large language model that powers everything. And this field, that anyone who's following the news, is like changing every day. Like literally new large language models are coming up every day. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to build an infrastructure that's pretty much plug and play to whatever the best large language model is in the future, so that whenever something better comes out, we're ready. Obviously, we need to be HIPAA compliant. We are hosting everything in our own infrastructure, so we cannot just go as soon as like a new GPT comes out, plug it in. But at least we can be ready whenever a good model comes in, and we can self-host it to do so.
Interesting. And are there issues across those? Did you say 50 languages? I think you said. Are there issues like with the large language model across those, or is it just that it translates it to English to do the large language model? Like that's, I mean, certainly, most people can do translation, if you will, from a certain language, or even medical transcription. Transcription's gotten pretty good across languages, but then does it apply in the model? That I don't know. I mean, maybe it's the wrong question. I'd love to hear, is that a
No,
problem?
no, it's, and by the way, that's one of the questions we get the most is about equity of that solution, right? So because if you have a patient and the patient only speaks Spanish, is your note going to be as good as if your patient speaks English? So at the end of the day, large language model usually as good as the data that they're trained on. Most of the data on the internet, not all of it, is English. So large language model perform best in English. Having said that, there are obviously very large corpus of text for all 50 languages that we support. And so I would say the it's still really good, but the quality of the note goes down based on the size of the corpus. So for instance, if you do a note in Japanese, I assume that the quality is not going to be as good as a note in English. And by the way, what we do is we don't do translation. If you are talking, so if you're talking to your patient in Japanese and you want your note to be written in Japanese, at no point will the note be written in English and translated, because that introduces like an extra step where data can be lost.
No, I think it's interesting, the language one, especially when you have multi languages in the same room. There's lots of interesting questions there. It's great that you're looking at that and working to solve that. How about when it comes to specialties? I think specialties is another area. Does it work across all specialties? Are you focused on certain specialties to start?
It's a great point. Actually, over time, what we've been doing is every time we had at the very beginning of the company, so a year and a half ago, when we had a new specialty on board, I would spend like an hour with them trying to figure out how this specialty really likes writing their notes. And then we built special note format for each specialty. So no, I think the last count we had like over like 20 type of notes that are, and all those notes can be edited. So if you are a gynecologist and you want, like the classic example I give all the time is gynecologists really love starting their notes with like letter soup, alphabet soup of like P3, G2, like the number of live births, the number of pregnancy, and the number of abortions. Um, and so that's something that obviously like the physician is not like, oh, you are like P2, G1, A0, or whatever. Like the doctor doesn't say it out loud. But what we can do with the AI is we can create a special section for that. So we've done it for gynecologists. So usually if you're like a gynecologist, when you have like an appointment, when you have a visit with a patient, we can format it that way. So right now we have over 20 um, 20 note template that are specialized for like specific specialties. So we have urology, dermatology, pediatrics, and also, so what we can do with these specific note templates is, one, we can structure it the way they want to structure it, and also we can listen for specific drug or medication that are very common in that specialty.
Interesting. Wow. I love these because this technology is incredible. But, I appreciate you taking time to share this, Ellie. I'm sure people that check this out are going to want to know, where can they go to get a demo? I think that's the first question everyone asks on this. So where can people go to learn more?
Yeah, so ScribeMD.ai, you can email us at contact@scribemd.ai. Also, if you go on our website, at the very bottom, there's a knowledge center. People can review a bunch of videos, see how they can get started. And also on the App Store, iOS, Android, download the ScribeMD application.
Awesome. Ellie, thanks so much for taking time to talk with us and share about your solution. It's going to be exciting. And 6 months from now, we'll be having a whole other conversation, I'm sure, as this space is moving quickly. So thanks so much. And thanks everyone for watching and listening. If you want to find more great healthcare IT content like this, be sure to check it out at healthcareittoday.com or search for Healthcare IT Today on your favorite podcasting application. Thanks, Ellie.
Thank you.